Hey, Discern listeners, it's time to continue watching an interview with Zanab from Love is Blind Season 3. Let's watch.
I think it started back as early as Malibu with the conversation about Colleen, like, hey, this is really shitty to hear. And like at the cocktail party, I was still just like, I can't look like that. I know what you like. I know you have a different type. I know you have a different physical type. I know I'm different physically. Like, he said all these things to me on camera. Beach in Malibu, you're fattening yourself up. You're different than all these things. So I think it was just all of that building up. But yes, we did try to have that conversation multiple times. But I was also, when those kind of things came up, it was, you have a bad attitude. You're not being sweet enough.
Okay, we'll take her word for that. Who knows? It's probable that there's another side of the story and that the truth somewhere lies in between, or there's a third truth. Or I've said this many times before, but I learned very quickly, and it's intuitive anyway, that when I would talk to couples, I would get very different stories about the same events. And we did see that with Zanab and Cole. The cuties scene, you hear her side of the story, what she remembers, and it makes Cole look very, very bad. You hear Cole's side of the story, and it's completely different. He's just like, what? Both seemed convincing. Both seemed to not be lying, right? We see the actual scene, and it was in the middle. He did say those things that she claims, but it looked like she was misinterpreting it. So anyway, but she's saying that she would frequently say, hey, you're really hurting my feelings when you are talking about my body and talking about how attracted you are to Colleen. It's really shredding my self-esteem. And then she said what he said.
When those kind of things came up, it was, you have a bad attitude. You're not being sweet enough. And then, of course, my mental health being questioned.
Right. So the mental health being questioned. Right. And by the way, I said this during the episode with the bipolar thing. People who have bipolar, just because they're diagnosed with bipolar and suffer from bipolar, it doesn't mean that everything they say is discountable. She is saying that he was saying to her, you need to be sweet. If I was to take a guess based on my experience in life with clients and with what we saw on the show, the edit that they presented, I'm guessing that what really happened was that she was distorting and getting overly hurt and then was hostile at times. I think there were other times when she was managing well, like when she was being called bipolar. She managed that seemingly pretty well. But there are other moments where she seemed to be blowing things out of proportion, getting very hurt by that. You know, she wasn't really good at exhibiting that hurt. People are pretty good about hiding their hurt. If you've ever had a cat that starts to suffer health-wise, at least the vet will tell me that cats evolved to hide their pain, to hide their physical ailments, because if they were to signal that, it might cause predators to come get them or something like that. I don't know if that's true, but we humans do that as well. When we're hurt, we tend to not want to show it, particularly if we don't trust other people to respond well to our signals that we are hurt. So I think she was tremendously hurt. I think partially by what he did and also partially by her distorted lens. Then she would become hostile with him. We saw that in the edit on that first day, and particularly on their honeymoon. And then he would be trying to deal with it. And some of the ways he dealt with it was neutral or positive, and some of it was not so great, calling her bipolar, that kind of stuff, calling her names. But in the midst of all that back and forth where she's being hostile and he is being defensive, it's possible at times he was saying, you need to be nicer. Please let's go through a day where we don't have any fighting. And I've worked with a lot of couples that have this profile. I don't know if I'm reading it right, of course, but I've worked with a lot of couples where someone with their relational traumas gets hurt very easily. Their way of dealing with it is to become hostile with their partners. And over time, the partners will see the pattern, whether they understand it or not. And you'll often hear from the partners of reactive individuals. They will say things like that. Kids will be like, could we just get through the day without anything being an issue? Because they know that there are days when there aren't any issues, when there aren't triggers to the person with these relational traumas. And so they're just like, because they also know that if they deal with it directly, it probably won't work out because it hasn't in the past. And so they're kind of pleading with him, could you just be in a good mood today, please? You know, that kind of, I'm guessing that's what was happening. But then she frames it as, I was communicating to him that he was hurting my feelings about my body, the way I looked, and maybe my ethnicity, I don't know. And he just would discount it and tell me that I'm ridiculous and tell me that I need to be sweet and nice. That's possible, but it's probably more of what I was saying earlier.
So just, I mean, I was going to ask you this anyway, but like you were saying, can you tell us more about the fattening up comment?
Yeah, that was on the beach in Malibu. He had got done surfing, and I offered him a bite of food, I think, and he was like, "No, you're fattening me up or something." And I was like, "Oh, you're like okay with me fattening myself up?" And he's like, "You're fattening yourself up."
Right. I'm glad the interviewer asked that because I was like, I kind of remember something like that. Yeah, that's she describes it well. Again, if you're a friend or another cast member and you hear this statement and you hear all the other things that you actually observed in terms of Cole's behavior, like, oh, I'm in love with Colleen's body, then this would sound awful. But we did see it, right? And I think his intention, who knows, it's hard, you can't know what someone's intention was, but I think his intention in that moment was he's just playing around. He's just being silly. We saw that when they were with the cutie scene. There was this moment when they crossed a line, and I think that their way of dealing with each other when they started to have a little bit of conflict was to kind of fight. And I don't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. It didn't usually turn out well. But anyway, so yeah, he was saying to her, well, you're fat. Yeah, I don't think he meant it like you're fat or you're disgusting or you need to not be eating that. But maybe he did. And you could certainly interpret it that way, right? Like a lot of people would know, especially under the circumstances that were happening between him and Zanab and Colleen, that you should probably steer away from those kinds of jokes, those kinds of silly playing around. I don't know, but what do you think was happening in that scene?
Yeah, so that someone messaged me actually about the sailboat date. I didn't even see it, but she was like, did you know, like, when the plate of food showed up, he goes, is that yours? About my plate of food. And I was like, really? I was like, I'm gonna have to go back and watch that, but it is there too. I watched it last night. So
now it is possible that his intention, his conscious intention, if we hooked him up to a lie detector test, which doesn't exist, but if one did and we hooked him up and said, were you intending on trying to put her down in terms of her body? That it's possible that he would say, no, I wasn't intending that, and he would pass the lie detector test. But even in that scenario, it's possible that underneath that, he was unconsciously commenting on things, that he unconsciously did want her to be different and to look different. There seemed to be a lot of joking comments in that direction, right? Who knows, but it's possible. And certainly that wouldn't be strange, right? For an American male to have stigma around women's bodies, right? It's not a stretch to imagine that. So is it possible that he was unconsciously attacking her and it was hurtful to her and wasn't a distortion? It's possible, absolutely.
Wow.
Just a lot of comments about food, and that partnered with the comparisons to Colleen and me not, like, I just can't look up, like, I can't be whiter, I can't have a ballerina body, unfortunately. So it was all those things. And yeah, we tried to have that conversation multiple times. But wedding, I also stood up there and I was like, I know you're a good guy. Like, I know you are.
Yeah, she's getting into that stuff, which I've already commented on. But yeah, another aspect of this is that as a half Asian person, I can relate to this to some extent and have certainly talked with a lot of people about their experiences that in our country, in the United States, and in other places around the world as well, but I can speak to the culture of mainstream United States, is that white is the best. And we study this up and down. There are many psychological, sociological studies that exhibit that humans prefer white people in a variety of contexts, that white people are seen as smarter, upper class, as more competent, as nicer. It's not always the case, of course. These are averages, but it's proven. And so it also is a phenomenon that people experience while they're dating, that people will have on their dating preferences. I don't want to date brown people or black people or Asians or whatever. They'll prefer white people. Now, some people don't, right? But on average, you'll run into that. So it's absolutely possible that Zanab has experienced that in the past. I would assume that she's experienced some of that, either personally or vicariously. It's also possible that Cole was acting that out. Now, other people will defend Cole and say that that wasn't why he didn't want to be with Zanab. He didn't want to be with Zanab because there just wasn't chemistry, because that's the other thing, that another part of this that I think is absolutely possible. For y'all out there, particularly younger people, you've probably been on online dating situations, and you've probably, if you've done it enough, you've had experiences, I'm guessing, where you have chemistry with someone while you're chatting online or talking on the phone or something. And then you meet up with that person and there's zero chemistry. You're just like, and you had all these expectations, like, oh, this could be the one. Like, we just had, everything's moving. We have so much in common. I'm attracted to this person online, and you meet up, and there's just something is off, either circumstantial, pheromones, three-dimensional, who knows? Attraction, love, it's kind of a magical thing. Science has tried to figure out the ingredients to attraction, and it's really hard for us to do that. These websites will claim that they have these algorithms that can predict whether or not two people will fall in love or be attracted to each other or get married. It's all bullcrap. There are some minor things that you can use as factors that might predict future behavior among couples, but human mating practices and mate selection practices are too specific and too varied, and there's so many factors that play into it. Anyway, so who knows, but you meet up with that person and you just feel nothing. It's likely that'll happen on the show, that you will fall in love in the pods and you meet up with the person and there's just something off. You just don't feel it. Now, my speculation is the producers are very quick to react to that, because I'm guessing there are interviews after, especially with the final couples that emerge, because a lot of money, millions of dollars, depends on those 6 couples making it to the altar. If even half of the couples don't make it to the altar, then they have wasted millions of dollars, and the people, the producers that are running the show, again, just speculating, they will lose their jobs. So in order for the workers on these shows to pay their bills, to pay rent or pay mortgage or pay their car payment, pay for their kids' food, there's things that people have to, in order for that to happen, they have to, as soon as they select those final couples, they have to get them to the altar. According to their model of what a successful show is, that's what they have to do. So you imagine that there are times when they will be interviewed, and so you could imagine that Cole being interviewed away from everyone, he's like, I don't know, I'm just not really feeling it. I still have feelings, but I don't know. And they've been around the block enough times as producers to know, like, this probably won't work, because we know from previous experience when we hear that from people once they meet in person, think Shayna and Kyle, think Mal and Sal. That my speculation is because remember Mal was just like, yeah, I don't know if I'm feeling it with Sal. Anyway, so they know how to detect that and how to attack that, and they really go after these people. Okay, whoa, give it another chance. Da 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 da. And total speculation. You could imagine Cole in that situation, 25 years old, being influenced, and the producer saying, but think about the love that you had in the pods. There was so much there. And he's just like, okay. Whereas if he was in a regular situation, he'd be like, yeah, I think I can't date this person. Just think about how many people do that, right? That you meet someone on Tinder, you have all this chemistry, you finally meet up, you feel nothing, and you might ride out that date till its end. You might even just leave in the middle of it or make an excuse or something. And then you say, no, there's just Some people will give it another date. They'll say, well, who knows? Maybe it's just a bad date. I'll give it one more. But usually if you're not feeling it, you're not feeling it. For mainstream Americans, they want to feel it. You want to feel that attraction. You want to feel that oomph, right? But given the scenario in the show, that's not possible, or the contract doesn't allow for that, or they're influenced or manipulated, or all the above. I don't know. It's just a possibility. So I think it's possible that for Cole, he either was confused or influenced or something, and he just didn't really know how to word things, and it had a really horrible effect on Zanab, which makes total sense, like I've been saying. Like, even if you just strip away all the accusations, just the fact that as soon as he meets her, or the day after they've spent a night together in person, I think it's the next day or so, very soon in their relationship in person, he's like, I'm attracted to this other woman. She's more my type. I mean, he's like, you're a 9, but she's a 10. I mean, just imagine what that would do to you. Like, that alone, and there were many other things, right? But that alone would just be hurtful and devastating and rejecting. I mean, it's an awful thing to hear. For those of you in a relationship right now, imagine if your partner said that to you. Imagine if your partner just turned to you and be like, yeah, so, this other person at work, totally my type. I'm in love with her whole body, and, you're lower, I'm less attracted. I mean, it's really hurtful. It's going to really shred your self-esteem.
I don't think you're a bad person. And I told him I loved him, and I did. And that's why I cried afterwards too. I was like, I didn't want the guy to hate me. But it was the best call for both of us. Like, it was not going to be a yes for him either,
Interesting. And I don't know all the things that have been said, but my speculation, as I've been saying, is that they were both no's, and she basically either speculated that he was going to be a no or knew that he was. I would assume that they both knew what they were going to say prior to walking up to the altar.
So do you think, obviously, because you had said, like, oh, you don't think he's a bad guy or anything like that, do you think that the comments that he was making about your appearance and your weight, do you think they were ill-intentioned?
I don't think he's malicious. No. He was intending to do any of that stuff. But I had brought it up, like with the self-esteem, like, I can't look like that.
Okay, interesting. We'll hear more of what she's saying, but in this instance, and it's a great question from that, this is in line with what I very long-windedly wanted to ask her, but he's saying, do you think he intended on actually trying to put down your body and body shaming? Or do you think he just unintentionally, as a naive person who's making naive jokes, was saying things that inadvertently body shamed you? And she says, no, I don't think he intended on it. That's interesting, which doesn't align with what she was saying at the altar or at the reunion. Maybe she's changed her mind. I don't know.
Brought it up, like with the self-esteem, like, I can't look like that. Okay,
but she is sure to say that, but I did bring up that I can't look like that. I'm trying to figure out how that relates. I mean, it relates, but how it directly relates to what he's saying. So it's possible that she views her statements towards him as having a strong foundation on what did happen, which she's describing it accurately, seemingly, that he was rejecting her based on her attractiveness. Did he ever say body? Because it could have been lots of things. But I think it's heavily implied by people watching, and it wouldn't be hard to imagine interpreting it that way, right? That the body differences, according to him, were so different that, anyway. So she's saying that is the foundation for having blasted him at the altar, which I'd have to rewatch the altar. But no, I mean, at the altar, the main things that I don't know. I could see that being kind of a foundation. I'll say that.
He's a bit ignorant, or, just doesn't really think too far ahead, or isn't exactly very considerate of you. Whereas I think when people watched the wedding, it had come across as if, like, your intentions there were to hurt him back after he had hurt you.
Yeah, I can see where people would say that, but it it just wasn't. It just wasn't, you know.
Okay, so we'll hear what she says here. She started off with, yeah, I could see how people would say that, but it just wasn't. All right, so let's see what she says.
And I know it got talked about at the reunion, and I'm like, come on, batch party girl, come forward too. But that was just kind of like one of the last conversations we had. And I was just like, you're so not ready to be married, and you don't respect me whatsoever. So it wasn't.
Okay, so if I'm interpreting that, who knows? But if I'm going to interpret it, she's like, you're not ready for marriage and you have disrespected me. Thus, I am okay, I'm valid in blasting you in the way that I did at the altar and saying some really horrible things at the reunion as well. And now she's saying that, from my impression, I think what she's basically saying right now is a lot of what she said was unfounded. That seems to be what she's saying. Either she knows that's what she's saying, or she doesn't know that's what she's saying. But that seems like what she's saying. A lot of the most egregious allegations that she made about him, she seemingly just completely undermined by what she said, and she's agreeing with a lot of the people that are at the very least not defending Cole, but are at the very least being like, well, I don't know, Zanab. So she seems to be agreeing with that.
It just wasn't, you know. And I know it got talked about at the reunion, and I'm like, come on, batch party girl, come forward too.
Right. So I've already speculated about this, but to do it again is that, and I don't know if anyone agrees with me on this point. I was telling my wife about this speculation. She was like, huh? But my speculation is that they, and given other statements that I've heard, people have said, other of the bachelors that gave reports about the bachelor party, that they had some alcohol, a lot of alcohol, and the evening was wrapping up and the cameras were going home. And after the cameras left, he's still intoxicated, tuned up, as we might say. And he's like, I want to get this party going even further. I have friends that are texting me. You know, they have their phones at that point. You know, 25, tuned up. It's 2 a.m. When I was 25, yeah, till 7 a.m. It's just like, let's keep going. And so who knows? But he texts some friends and they're like, let's meet up at this club, late night club. They meet up and he's there and he knows he's a no. And he knows she's a no, or highly suspects it. So he knows that he's not actually in a relationship. Because that's the other thing, as I'm guessing, another layer to the speculation, which I have no data for. But days or weeks earlier, they had decided internally that they were a no. At some point, they told each other. At that point, you're not in a romantic relationship anymore in all likelihood. If I was to take a guess, if that is true, and who knows, that they said, okay, then let's just go through the motions. We'll go, we'll act on camera like we're in a relationship because we're under contract to do that. But let's go to the altar. Whoever goes first will say no, and then, we'll be friends. So he's intoxicated. He can't, because he's young, and, well, really anyone's intoxicated lacks the ability to think for the future. And instead of thinking, do I really have to flirt with someone tonight? Maybe I can wait a few weeks or something. Like, tonight isn't but you're highly, who knows, he could have been highly intoxicated. He's out and about. He is thinking as a single person, meets someone, kisses her or got her phone number or something, comes home and is like, oh, this could get back around to Zanab. So I don't want that to happen. I don't want to hurt her feelings. So I'm just going to tell her. And I'll say, look, I know we agree. Again, this is lots of speculation, but this is top of my list of hypotheses. He tells her, remember we broke up a few weeks ago? Well, I got drunk and I asked this woman for her phone number. I kissed her, or whatever he said. And I didn't want you to find out from some random person. I just wanted to tell you up front because I just want to be truthful with you. And then she's like, yeah, totally cool. We're broken up. No big deal. Then when she's at the reunion, she feels like her bullet points aren't really convincing people. And so later on in the reunion, she starts grabbing at any other piece of data she can to blast him, to make herself look justified in the way the things that she was saying, the things that she did. And she pulls this one out, and if you look at Cole's face, he's like, no, because he calculates in that moment that, but we agreed we were going to both lie about this whole thing. And I've already been lying about that. And I can't really admit to that because, one, that makes me look like a horrible person. But my only defense to that would be to say that we had already broken up, which I can't do because, again, very speculative. And so, because the way she talks about the thing that he said about that at the bachelor party, they did meet up with someone, that Cole did meet up with someone. And I think even some of the other bachelors have confirmed that he did go out, or maybe Cole and one of the other fellas went out afterwards. Because Cole claims that he didn't go out afterwards, but I think there is at least enough evidence that did happen. So that would lead to the possibility of this other thing happening. And so it's just speculative. And the way that Zanab talks about it, it sounds convincing, right? It's hard to imagine a scenario where she would be distorting something such that would be the story, right? So she's like, hey, how about this other woman come for? Or Cole is a dirtbag, and he actually absolutely did cheat on her that night, which is absolutely possible, and came home and told her. But that's kind of weird, right? That he told her story, according to her story, he came home that night, the day before the wedding, told her about it. Why would he, if he was a dirtbag and did cheat, which is possible, why would he say something, right? Why would he didn't have to. So, I don't know. What do you think?
But that was just kind of like one of the last conversations we had. And I was just like, you're so not ready to be married and you don't respect me whatsoever. So it wasn't.
You can tell me.
Now, another possibility, speculation upon speculation, is that although they were both a no and had conferred or heavily known that the other person, or heavily suspected that the other person was going to say no, that they still had feelings for each other, and that although on paper it was not a violation for him to be flirting, and maybe she was even flirting with people online as well, who knows, but that he comes home, when people break up, actually we saw Nancy and Bartiz go through this, that you are in a long-term relationship or a significant relationship, you break up, and then you see, you're still friends on Facebook or Instagram or something, and you see them posting a picture of them getting real cuddly and kissy with a new partner. And this is, some short distance after breaking up. Now, on paper, well, he's single now, he can date, that's fine. But it wouldn't be unusual to be hurt by that, even though rationally that's fine. You might even be dating as well. But it gets under your skin. It hurts. It's like, ugh, that's hard to see, particularly if you're the one that got dumped, right? Particularly if you're the one that got dumped because you were told that you're insufficient in some way, which was what Cole was saying, at least that's one way of phrasing it. She's not insufficient, I want to be clear, but you could imagine someone feeling that. So again, speculation upon speculation, they both know they're done with the relationship. He comes home, he's like, I just want to tell you. She's like, yeah, it's fine. But in her heart, she's like, oh, it's just like, she's probably more beautiful than I am or whatever. And you're hurt. And seemingly the way that she dealt with hurt was to catalog it, to put it in a box. And that's interesting. I wonder if she was, again, speculation upon speculation, that she was legitimately hurt for reasons that everyone would agree with, like, wow, that was hurtful in her childhood, in her previous relationship, something. But she didn't feel, or she tried to communicate about it, but people told her that she needs to be nice or whatever. And so when she's prone to get very hurt, and then she's prone to put it in a box, but then eventually it can't take anymore, and then she's got to blast. It's got to all come out. It seems to fit in terms of what we saw, right? Who knows?
You heard I said what happened at the reunion with the bachelor party girl. Like, Cole offered that information to me. I just don't have to make up anything else about what he said. Like, taking away everything I said that happened off camera, look at the stuff that happened on camera. He is that person that will just tell you outright, and he did tell me about that girl, and I just was like, okay.
Right, it sounds believable, right? When she was talking about the cuties, the mandarin oranges or the tangerines, when you hear that story from her, especially when you see the scene, you'd be like, oh, well, there's a different perspective if we see the situation, right? That is the fact. That is a fact that he did say that sentence. I mean, she had it word for word, seemingly, which is another piece of evidence in that conceptualization that she will put things in a box and ruminate on it and then later blast them for it. Who knows? But with those previous accounts, that her narrative, even when you hear it, you can imagine, well, there's a lot of other possibilities. Because she's not a liar, right? She hasn't seemingly lied about things. She's seemingly distorted or overreacted or something. Who knows? But it wouldn't be consistent with the way it was edited that she would just make something like that up, that he came home from the bachelor party and tells her, I met someone else, and da-da-da. It just doesn't seem likely that she would just make that up. And the way that she says it, it's hard to know. You can't read people's minds. There's no lie detector, and there's all this BS online and on YouTube about being able to detect lies by body language or eye movements. It's all bullcrap. Believe me, psychology, social sciences has for decades been trying to determine if we can determine when someone is lying or not. We cannot. We can use research regarding lying and behavior to inform the possibility of someone telling the truth or lying, but we are very far from being able to determine 100, even 90% of the time whether or not someone is telling the truth or lying. But the way that she says that, it reads to me like a true story. But I'm guessing that there's another side of the story that they both can't talk about because of the contract. Or he's a total dirtbag, which is absolutely possible. All right, well, let's end it there. I'm talking a lot as I'm watching this. There's so much to say. And tune in next time when I continue watching this interview. And everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.